Good morning. I'm Morgan Spicer, Special Projects Coordinator with the ARC of the Mid-Ohio Valley.
And I'm Melissa Southall, Self-Advocate Coordinator for the ARC of the Mid-Ohio Valley and People First of West Virginia. And welcome to another episode of Legislative Matters Now with M&M. We are so glad you're joining us today.
Yes, and welcome to the show. First, let's talk about the purpose of the show, which is to educate you, the self-advocate, on the important topic of legislative advocacy in a way that makes sense for you.
That's right, Morgan. But this month, we are going to do something special. We started the show in February, and I must say, Morgan, it has been an exciting ride exploring legislative advocacy, as well as talking to all of our special guests and self-advocates.
It has, Melissa. And this month, instead of having a guest and an advocate in action segment, we decided to do something a little different this time. Melissa and I spent some time checking out all of our previous episodes and handpicked some of the highlights. I must say, Melissa, it was tough because I wanted to pick them all. All of our interviews with our guests and advocates in action have been amazing. Let me tell you, this was not easy.
It wasn't, Morgan. I agree. But after some careful decisions, we chose the top 10 highlights from each episode we feel make Legislative Matters Now with M&M truly shine. Join us, Morgan and I personally count down the top 10 segments from our show so far.
Our first clip is from our second episode, where we talked to Vicki Wolf as she encouraged self-advocates to focus on what's important and prioritize when it comes to their goals.
With my disability, it didn't stop me. My disability did not stop me from owning my own home. Mm-hmm. And you have to want something bad enough to take the steps to owning your own home. And you have to make a lot of sacrifices. You have to do without a lot of things you want. Not need, but want. So, people out there, if you want to own your own home, you have to make a lot of sacrifices.
Our second clip is from our pilot episode. We got to speak to Allie Hildebrand from Congressman David McKinley's office. She spoke to us about the best ways to get a hold of your senators and delegates.
Yes, and good morning to you all as well. And thank you guys so much for hosting this today and inviting the congressman to be a part of this event. And just so you guys know, the best way to reach our office, as Senator Capito mentioned in her video, you can write to us. However, sometimes the mail can be slow or delayed. I think it can take up to about 2 weeks for us to receive a letter in the office after someone has mailed it, or sometimes longer. So the best way I would suggest is either reach out to one of our district offices. We have 3 in District 1. We have one located right there in Parkersburg. We have one in Wheeling and one in Morgantown. Or you can call the DC office, or you can go onto the congressman's website and send us an email, and the staffer will get back with you within a week or so with a response to the inquiry. If you have a concern or an issue with regarding federal legislation, please feel free to call the DC office. If it's regarding appropriations or anything, we are equipped to handle those type of issues. If it is a issue with the State Department, with the state agency or a federal agency, I would suggest calling one of the 3 district offices that I mentioned, either Morgantown, Wheeling, or Parkersburg. Our caseworkers are very hardworking, and we have a very good track record. I know since the years that the congressman has been in office, we have closed over 10,000 cases for our constituents in District 1. So if you have any issue with anything, please reach out to our office. If it's not something that we can help you with, we will find someone who can help you.
Our third clip is from our pilot episode where we talked to Charlotte Roth about the letter she wrote to former President Donald Trump. Now, this was a great example of self-advocacy. So check this out.
Well, the responses I have received was the one from Shelley Capito stating that, we were working on trying to get the apartment complex that I'm living in now, and my partner Sue, that she needed the walk-in shower, and I just briefly put, and who owned these apartments, and I went from there, and Mrs. Capito was able to find me that information. Then she gave me another number to call, and I called it too. So, and then they responded. Everybody's pretty much responded back to me, but they're just kind of waiting until all this coronavirus is over.
You also wrote a letter to President Trump. How did you get a response there?
I did from his secretary. His secretary called me and said that they were really interested in it, and but that didn't get to go through because Mr. Trump didn't get back into office. And I haven't written one yet to Mr. Biden. I figured, well, maybe they lost that one, and I figured I'd eventually write another one to Biden. And I did send another one to Mr. Manchin.
In episode 6, we talked to our advocate in action for the month, Patrick Weber. He gave some tips on being effective advocates. Here he is at number 4.
Yes, I was just doing is like looking up people first. Website, I was just looking this up on Facebook. I was also just patience because sometimes it takes them a while to understand about and to understand like our issues we may have.
Coming up at number 5, we spoke to Kendra Shaw, who was our advocate in action, and she spoke to us about why self-advocacy matters and encourages our viewers.
Self-advocacy is extremely important because even though we're in 2021, the people of the disability community carry this stigma with them, and no matter how we try to shake it, it's still there. So we have to advocate for ourselves. We have to let other folks know that these are our skills, these are our abilities. We can shine. We can do just as much as if not more than the able-bodied individual. And we have to kind of do that for ourselves because it's just people who are able-bodied or who are not in a wheelchair, don't have a disability, let me put that way, have these preconceived notions. So we have to dispel those myths and really show everyone who we really are. And the only way I know to do that is to raise our voices and keep talking and showing and being determined. So that's why it's so important, and to educate our young ones that are coming up in this world not to see that, not to have the same vision as individuals before them did, to educate them, to not have to even deal with that, to be more accepting, to be helpful, and to just understand. Advocacy is so important in many, many ways.
Number 6, we talked to West Virginia House of Delegates member Diana Graves, about why the newly passed Employment First bill was so important to her.
It was important for a couple of different reasons. The first reason is, I think, the conceptual reason, which we can all and should all get behind. It's important that people with disabilities are able to work when they want to work, and that they should be encouraged to work if they want to work. There should definitely be an outlet for them where they feel, empowered, they're contributing to society, to their families. I think we can all get behind that. The second reason that it was important is West Virginia has said for a number of years that they already had an employment first kind of policy. We didn't see the evidence of that. So I thought that it was important that this legislation advance this year because it has timelines and goals, and it outlines what our expectations are so that the agencies can have some kind of guideline for what it is that the legislature expects. So those were the two reasons for me.
Now for number 7. In episode 3 of our show, we got to speak to Parkersburg High School sophomore Anna Earl. She spoke to us about how cerebral palsy has affected her life.
So it's a disability, and it's caused by a brain injury at birth or near birth, and it impacts everybody differently. So for me, it just impacts my lower body and impacts the way I walk. So sometimes, like when the weather is bad, my legs get tight and I have some pain when I'm walking. But for some people, it can impact all 4 limbs, or maybe they have some trouble speaking. Everybody's a little bit different. So when I was younger, I used leg braces called AFOs to help with stability. And when I started growing, my muscles kind of grew at a different rate. So I got really tight and I started having a lot of trouble walking. So I had to have a surgery called selective dorsal rhizotomy, SDR. And that's helped me so much. I'm able to walk independently now, and it's just been great.
For number 8, I got to speak to West Virginia University College student Kylie Smith about a policy brief she is working on that would benefit individuals with disabilities.
Yeah, so at West Virginia University, being in the School of Public Health, I had to take a lot of different classes on public health as well as public health writing and how to advocate for individuals as well as populations. And something that I was personally passionate about was individuals with disabilities. So I wrote a policy brief in a class where we talked about health policy, and it was designed to take anything that we saw at WVU that needed changed, updating, or just something we'd like to see implemented. And I decided to work on accessibility to education as well as just the physical and built environment within the school. So I wrote a lot of different pieces on this, but it had to mainly do with a lot of mobility disability as well as education and access within the actual classroom environment and just getting from class to class. So I had a professor that taught that class, and she saw the potential in the policy brief that I wrote, which kind of outlined steps I think WVU could have taken or can take, as well as what that would look like, what resources we would need. And so it kind of started off from there, and we built on that throughout the semester of last year. And it started with some ideas such as a module that would include just education on what it means to have a disability, what it looks like for someone's experience to be that, as well as the resources, the education, the policies that WVU has in place already and that can be moving. That module was a development out of that, as well as what can WVU do to include accessibility on campus, as well as the physical environment. So that might look like mapping, or that might look like adding new ramps, that might look like adding new accessibility and ADA features throughout campus. So the policy brief itself was just navigating and kind of detailing all the pieces that it would take for WVU to become more inclusive and more accessible. And those were the two main pieces, but there were also just things like creating awareness on campus. What would it look like to maybe see an advocacy or awareness week on campus? What would it look like maybe to advocate for funding within the school as well as outside of it on individuals with disabilities and research within the school, but as well as just WVU wide, since we're a part of the Morgantown community and what they also need within the community. So the policy brief was just a multi-stage, multi-layer piece that took what WVU could do as an institution to help people with individuals with disabilities around campus as well as just within the community.
Coming in at number 9, I got the opportunity to speak with Ann McDaniel from the statewide Independent Living Council about different methods to contact legislators.
In person is always preferable because you can make a more personal connection, but it's not always possible, especially if it's the session and you don't live close to Charleston, especially if you want to talk to a legislator who's from a different part of the state. But everybody has gotten a lot more savvy about how to do that during the pandemic and as more electronic options have become available. So you can find all of their contact information on the legislative website. So that's one way to figure out a good way to talk to them. You're going to find home phone numbers as well as state capitol phone numbers. Many of them put their email addresses on the legislative website. Some during the session, emails usually aren't good because they get so many they don't read them. If you're a Facebook person, Facebook is a great way to connect with legislators. Most of them are on there. Friend them, and then you'll see what they're talking about. And they'll see what you're talking about. If you post things, they'll see it if they're your friend and you're their friend. But you can also use that messaging app that's on Facebook to instant message people. And they have that on their phone. So you can reach them quickly if you want to do that. I have a colleague who is an expert at doing that and has lots of relationships with legislators just because she friended them and she messages them through Facebook. So that's always a good thing to do. Obviously, you can call them and talk to them on the telephone, but because of the electronic options that are available, I really suggest that you do Facebook or Zoom or Skype or one of those not Facebook, FaceTime, or one of those kinds of applications where you could see each other. Mm-hmm. And they really like that too. And they've gotten really used to doing that during the pandemic. This past legislative session, when people weren't really at the Capitol, people still scheduled meetings and we still met with legislators and we used FaceTime or Zoom so that they could see us and we could see them, and more than one person could be talking with them at a time. And that is really, really helpful. And the legislators really like doing that.
Last but certainly not least, at number 10, I got to speak to Carissa Davis from the Olmsted Council about how Olmsted can tie into legislation.
Yes. Bills introduced during the legislative session could impact the Olmsted decision goal of having people with disabilities live in the most integrated setting. So we have an Olmsted Council, and members of the council monitor bills and advocate to eliminate the institutional bias.
We hope you enjoyed our picks on what we feel were the top 10 highlights of our 7 episodes so far. There's plenty more where that came from. And although we couldn't pick them all, we encourage you to check out the People First of West Virginia Facebook page and check out all of our past episodes. We want to properly thank everyone for taking the time out of their ever important schedules to speak with us and help the sub-advocates we serve on a daily basis understand the importance of legislative advocacy, as well as encouragement from our sub-advocates featured on Advocate in Action. We could have not done it without you all.
Absolutely, but we are not done yet. We are looking forward to the future and will continue to bring the important topic of legislative advocacy to the forefront with amazing guests as well as self-advocates in our advocate and action segments that will enlighten and encourage you to stand up and speak for the topics that are important to you.
Indeed. Now, as always, we want to encourage you that if there is a piece of legislation you do not understand and you would like us to cover it on a future episode of Legislative Matters Now, please do not hesitate to reach out to us. We would love to hear from you and help you clarify what you're having trouble understanding. Or if you want to be on a future segment of Advocate in Action, again, reach out to us and let us know. We welcome your suggestions. You can call the ARC of the Mid-Ohio Valley at 304-422-3151, or you can email me and Melissa personally. My email address is morgan.spicer@thearcmov.org.
You can also contact me, melissa.southall@peoplefirstwv.org.
Well, I think this went very well, Liz, and what so far, since this was one of the things that you and Morgan talked about, how do you think things have gone so far over the past several episodes?
Well, I'm not surprised at all, but I'm going to use an M word since we have Morgan and Melissa. Marvelously. I mean, just great work on their behalf, researching, thinking about topics that are important, reaching out to the appropriate people to speak with, and then just doing phenomenal interviews. So I think marvelous is the word for M&M.
And I agree, because there are days when they're reading going through things and there's an extra question that needs to be asked, and Morgan will ask it, or Melissa will ask it, or I'll forget to, if I'm helping to write or come up with questions, and they'll just ask it. And I'm like, yes, this is great. So I have got to say that I'm very proud of the work that these two, and it's very difficult to sit here and look at the camera for half hour, an hour at the beginning and read the script and get it right and all that. I'm very impressed.
Me too. And what people at home don't normally realize is that there's so much work prior to getting the show, coming up with the ideas, what's important to people, because Melissa and Morgan don't just pick topics out of the air. They really are thoughtful about what's going on, what's important to people first self-advocates throughout the state. Who could they talk to? What questions are important to ask? What contact information they need to share? There's a whole lot that goes into it, writing a script.
And not everyone is available. When you call up a legislator, in the past week, like last week was interim sessions. So if you call them and say, hey, can we talk to you? They may be, I'd love to, but right now I'm available next Thursday at 2:00, or I'm available only Monday at 10 a.m. And then you have to adjust. And so there's been they've had to come in at different times as well. This is not their full-time job.
Exactly. And both of them have been very accommodating and punted when they've needed to punt. And so marvelous.
Yes, I think it's been very. So I did want to ask, so what have you two learned so far? You have brought a lot of great knowledge to all of the people who watch. And I've learned things too. I mean, I've been around it and learned that. I'm like, oh, I didn't realize that. Like when you talk to Carissa Davis from the Olmsted Council, I didn't know all those things about the decision. So what would you say is your top thing you've learned through all of this, Melissa?
I believe the thing that I've learned the most is from other self-advocates and how important self-advocacy is to them and the struggles that they've had to overcome.
Okay.
Yes.
How about you, Morgan? What have you learned most?
For one, I learned a lot more about various acts and legislatures and Senate bills that I didn't know about. I didn't certainly know about redistricting. I certainly didn't know about Olmsted, but every day I come in here, it's a learning experience for me. So I'm always learning something new to broaden my experiences. So it's great that, these shows are also learning experiences for me because I'm learning so much more and expanding my knowledge.
Good. Now, my question is, what's the most fun thing you've done for the show? Like if you could pick one thing that you really enjoyed and was a lot of fun, what would that be? We'll start with you this time, Morgan, if that's okay.
Well, me and Melissa have a little tagline we like to do on our scripts. So every time I add it, Melissa seems to just jump right up. And so that's right, Melissa?
That's right, Morgan.
There it is.
And I will say as a side note that they have so much fun with it that Doug has had to edit a little bit when we've had too much fun and not been able to get back on track.
If we get our bloopers, we certainly should. I might have to later.
So that's right, Melissa. What is your favorite?
I think my favorite is the fun that we've had, and me saying that's right, Morgan, probably 1,000 times or more.
I will definitely say, since I've worked with you on this show, that I've noticed that your enthusiasm has gone up tremendously. I love having you as a co-host.
And I love having you as a co-host.
Perfect.
And I think that's one of the things that's important. If you like the people that you work with and you like the topics that you're doing, it makes it a lot of fun. And I do have to say that Morgan, you'll see a little credit at the end of the shows. Morgan does a lot of the research and a lot of the writing, and then I'll look through it and Liz will look through it. But and then he'll meet with Melissa and say, hey, what questions should we ask? And they work together. So this is not Liz and Doug in the background writing a show, and they're just sitting down and saying all this stuff that Liz and Doug told them to say. This is all, everything that you're listening to today. If I catch a word here and there, but 98% of everything you're hearing today plus is Morgan and Melissa.
Exactly. Melissa brings her experience and her knowledge and her insight, and Morgan brings a curiosity and a talent for writing.
Yep.
So it's just kind of a perfect blend that they're able to work together. So great job. Impressive.
I'm very proud of both of you. Yes. And you can tell if you go back and look at the first show and then you look at this show, Melissa, when she first started here 5 years ago, to think she was going to be able to get up in front of people and talk, she'd have rather had a root canal. And now she can get up. So
we can't keep her quiet.
So that's exactly right. So over time, she's learned how to stand up and give live presentations. And now, reading a teleprompter and doing these things and making sure, I'm very impressed with both of them. Morgan had some of that in school, but Melissa never read a teleprompter. I hadn't been on. So we put Melissa on the spot and she has really shined. I'm very impressed.
Yes. So kudos to Eminem and wonderful job. Thank you.
Thank you to all of you who have watched and sent suggestions and been guests, because they have put some of you on the spot and asked you questions, and you've been very gracious in your answers. And as they both said, if you have a topic that you want them to research or you'd like to be on the show, give Melissa and Morgan a call, send them an email. We need more advocates in action and more legislation.
And very quickly, thank you to the ARC of the United States.
Yes.
The funding from them made this happen. And thank you for the continued support of the West Virginia Developmental Disability Council.
Yes, definitely. We certainly couldn't do it without them. So,
and
all right.
More importantly, thank you for joining us. And remember, advocacy matters.
And so do you.
See you next time.
See you next time.